Good evening, everyone. Welcome to IKG's Wisdom Wednesday. I am Sister Ajwa, coordinator of the IKG Wisdom Wednesday lecture series, and we are so excited that you are here to join us this evening for our July virtual presentation. As you all are coming in the chat, we do ask that you let us know who's in the building. So feel free to shout out your city, your town, your country, because we know we're getting people in from all over the world. So let us know who is here. Also, just a few logistics before we begin. This presentation is being recorded, and we ask that if you would like to engage in the presentation, that you utilize the chat box for that. However, if you have a question for our guest speaker, we do ask that you put those questions in the Q&A box. At the conclusion of the presentation, I will filter those questions from the Q&A box to ask our presenter. So again, if you would like your questions asked, please put them in the Q&A box. So again, a little bit about Wisdom Wednesday. Wisdom Wednesday is a free lecture series that is held every third Wednesday of the month. And we've been doing them virtually now for a little over a year. And we bring in speakers that talk about topics relative to Black people. And we really seek to bring in and find information that can help, that we can apply to our own lives. So today is no different, and we're very happy to be presenting one of IKG's own, Brother Yahuwah, who will be speaking on scientific literacy in the age of reason, how you can find the knowledge of yourself. So a little bit about our speaker, Brother Yahuwah. He was born in the Sudan, Africa, and migrated to the United States around the age of 6. He completed his education in the US and holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in electrical engineering from Norfolk State University. Brother Yahuwah has held many lectures on various topics, including history, science, mathematics, spirituality, and religion. He has been featured on radio shows in the Tidewater area and DC, such as WPFW, discussing Black empowerment. He also facilitates field trips in the District of Columbia, developed by Tony Browder, showing the connection between DC and ancient Kemet, or Egypt. Brother Yahuwah is currently working to finish up his first book called Knowledge, Wisdom, and Understanding, a guide to gain knowledge of self. And tonight, he's going to be presenting on some of these topics. He writes, in a complex world where there is an abundance of information at our fingertips, it becomes difficult at times to discern fact from fiction. Some information sounds correct and even makes sense. However, it is often incorrect or only half-truths. And without an analysis, we would incorporate it into our thinking. The incorporation of misinformation creates inaccurate perceptions and biases of the world around us. Possessing scientific literacy can help untangle much of the information and allow us to think critically to better make sense of the world around us. In the topic, scientific literacy in the age of reason, how you find the knowledge of yourself, he will examine what it means to be scientific literate, why it's important, and what is knowledge of self, and how the two intersect. So at this time, please join me in welcoming Brother Yahuwah. Awesome. You are.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. You ready to start, Sister Ajwa?
Yes, we are ready to begin.
Peace, everybody. Thank you, Sister Ajwa, for that introduction. Thank you, Brother Tony Roder, for having the insight to continue these Wisdom Wednesdays and the work that Sister Audra has been doing the last couple of years to make sure that Wisdom Wednesdays continue and the information is being presented in these Wisdom Wednesdays. Like she indicated, there's a lot of presenters that come on doing Wisdom Wednesdays. So if you have never attended before, if you have attended before, you know, there's a lot of information that's presented on those Wisdom Wednesdays, and it's a great opportunity for everybody to gain information. But it's also more important that once you gain that information from those presenters, including this presentation as well too, is incumbent upon everybody to do the research as well too. I think that's key, and we'll get into a little bit of that today during this presentation. I don't like to call it a lecture. I'm not lecturing anybody, but it's more about presenting information where it's easy for the individuals to go out and actually do research on it. You can't take anything on face value. It becomes very difficult in this time to take things on face value with a lot of complexity in the world, with a lot of dangers in the world, to take stuff on face value and just live your life based on that concept. So we'll get into that a little bit today in the lecture, the presentation. And like I said, I hope that you will research some of the information that's being presented. Look some of these things up. Look some of these individuals up that we're probably going to present in my slides, and then go from there. One of the main reasons why I chose this topic is because in the last couple of years, I wouldn't even talk about the dumbing down of America. That's been going on for decades. But in the last couple of years, specifically the last 4 years, we've seen a rise of conspiracy theories. We're seeing a rise of more opinions rather than thinking. That's the best way to present it. And there's nothing wrong with conspiracy theories, but when you start looking and governing your life and the way you walk and the way you talk and the things that you do based on conspiracy theories without any facts, without anything to support those conspiracy theories, to make those conspiracy theories not a conspiracy theory anymore, but actually make it into a fact, that's where it becomes dangerous. And I think that's where we are today, unfortunately. There's been a plethora. 5G started COVID. The flat Earth concept, the planet Earth is flat. Those type of conspiracy theories where people, we won't get into that. And if you do believe those things, that I'm not here to dismantle those things. That's a whole different topic on its own. Get into the science of flat Earth and get into the science of 5G and telecommunication and how that works and all those things. That's a whole different topic. That's getting into engineering and communication and stuff like that. But you see a rise in that. Like again, there's nothing wrong with that. So if you want to deal with conspiracy theories, that's fine. But you have to find a point in time where you say, there's a great conspiracy theory. I have to go out and I got to do the research. I think that's something that's been missing the last couple of years, where people don't sit down and actually do the research and actually make that into, it's like a lost art form. When I was coming up in my research, and when I was coming up in finding myself and the knowledge of self and things like that, I spent years looking up and trying to solve certain equations and certain mathematical problems to try to understand the world around me. Books stacked to a certain length in the library. I'm spending hours in the library. I even not changed my major, but I kind of took a pause from studying electrical engineering, taking those classes, and decided to take a semester where I was doing some psychology courses, some history courses, to try to broaden my ideas and things like that, just beyond the physics and thermodynamics and differential equations type of stuff, and to getting into like behavioral psychology, psychology of religion types of stuff, to try to understand different concepts and things like that. So it took me a little longer to get my degree, but it was worth it because it gave me the opportunity to do to research and to look into other things. I think a lot of the young people or individuals today who consider themselves woke, they don't look at it from their perspective. They want microwave knowledge. They rather just get the information, stick it in the microwave, put it on for 30 seconds, and voila, they have the information. They know everything. They got everything together. So doing research and looking back and stumbling on stuff as you're doing research, going back into history as you're doing research, connecting the dots, synthesizing information, because not everything's in one book. So you got to get a number of books. And then on top of that, once you get the data and information from those books, this is part of research. Years later, there's more data that can be incorporated into what you already know. So you continue to learn. So information that you might have had or you learned in the 80s or in the 90s or early 2000s, there's been a lot of research down in those arenas where you might want to go back and add more information to what you think you have already learned, picked up on those books. So it's very important that we get into that type of thinking, we get into that type of research to be able to speak intelligently in the world around us. It's like I said, the last couple of years, it just seemed like it's been like a downfall, a rapid downfall. Like I said, the dumbing of America, or what you want to call the dumbing of America, or worldwide, it's been going on for decades. It's just we're seeing a lot of the residual products of those things that were happening in the 80s and the late 70s and all those things that kind of added up to where we are today with the thinking of how people are today. So with all that being said, that's one of the main reasons we're dealing with today's topic on scientific literacy, especially in a time where information is at your fingertip. You know, it's not difficult to Google certain things. It's not difficult to Google some of these conspiracy theories. It's not difficult to do it. When I was coming up in the 90s, there was no Google. Just to date myself, there was no Google. The internet, I think, was starting to develop. There was a whole bunch of search engines that was coming up, and I'm definitely dating my age now. But it's we're just starting to come on the scene where it was being where you see a lot of it. You know, other than going to libraries, you can go to locations to get on the computer and do a Yahoo search or a Google search, and Google started developing, had all these search engines where you can find. There wasn't a lot of information, but now it's different. In this environment where you can Google certain things. And now what Google is not the end and all. So again, when you're dealing with scholarly research, you just don't go get a Google map and look at stuff, or get a YouTube video and watch somebody else's wisdom of what they think the situation is. And then you go out and you speak on that. That doesn't mean that that's research. That's just somebody else's wisdom of what they researched or how far it took them. But Google's a good start. It takes you to a place like Wikipedia, where Wikipedia is not the best source, but it does give you sources at the very end. So if you look at Wikipedia, it gives you a starting point, and then you might want to find books and start reading those and look at the bibliography of those books and start doing research. So in this time where there's a time of reasoning that we're in as a society, and we have access to all this information at our fingertips, you don't have to even leave your home. Just Google these things. It's shocking that the rate of conspiracy theories has risen over the years, or the door has been allowed for those types of things to come out and invade our thinking and the way that we deal with each other, in a sense. Also, we have the highest rate of education, around the world. You got the most educated people worldwide, but in the United States, you got a lot of here in the District of Columbia alone, got the highest amount of individuals, got PhDs and things like that. So we are in a different age in this year where there's a lot of people with so-called education, have the ability to reason, have the ability to think through things and process certain things from a strategic standpoint, but then yet you still have a high rate of these types of other things that are coming out that are contrary to facts or truths. One of the things that I'll stop here just before I even share my slide, is that usually when I do these presentations, I do them live, so this is one of the first ones. I was joking with Audra before we came on that is going to be, because I feed off the energy of the audience. I feed off the energy of the individuals that are there, the questions that they may ask, their body language and things like that. So it's difficult in this type of environment. So if you see me now, it looks like I might be rambling on. Please raise your hand. Don't hesitate to stop me somehow, or maybe I can catch it in the chat box. That if you had a question or something like that, and we'll see how that works out. But obviously, at the end of the presentation, we'll give you opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So, with that being said, I'm gonna share my presentation, and we'll get into the concepts. Like I said, of scientific literacy. We'll define it, what the scientific literacy means, connecting it to knowledge of self. What is knowledge of self? The difference between scientific literacy and knowledge of self. And then we'll get into a lot of other things. So I'm gonna share now. See if you guys will be able to see it. Okay, you can all see it, I hope.
Yes, we
Yes.
can see.
Okay. So one of the things that about dealing with scientific literacy is, and not knowledge itself, it's dealing with the origin. We all have to eventually deal with the origin of existence itself. You know, I'm not going to get too deep and things like that, but getting into the origin of life itself and existence itself, because that's dealing with ultimately knowledge itself. If you look at any civilization that came on the scene, any ancient civilization, and these are the things that sometimes when we talk about ancient civilizations and the wonders that they did, Kemet and the pyramids that they built, Mesopotamia and things that they did, and all the ancient civilizations, you can look them up, and we'll go over some of them in a few minutes. That um, you there's certain things that are overlooked. You know that it's there, but we don't really talk about it. Same thing with a lot of the organizations that came on the scenes, the influential organizations that had impact here in the United States and worldwide. The Marcus Garvey movement, the Nation of Islam, the Noble Drew Ali movement, all those movements, the Black Panthers, all those movements. We study those time periods. We study those individuals. We study those civilizations, and we pick up information from those time periods to understand how they lived, the things that they did to try to use that information to better understand the condition that we're in today, so that way we can move forward with that insight and with that knowledge. But one of the things that is usually missed, or it took me a while also through my research to always see that was always embedded in there, that is never talked about that much, that these civilizations, they were great because they had a sense of spirituality. And I'm not talking about a spirituality in the sense of a mystery, a spook, mental spirituality in the true sense of the word, being in connection with your life force, that energy within you, that or your purpose in life, and you bring that purpose within yourself out. And that's what dealing with spirituality, that energy within self. These civilizations, they dealt with spirituality. These individuals that came and seen, they had some type of connection with themselves. They had some connection with their origin, or what they conceived to be their origin, and then they used that energy that they had within themselves, and they manifested it out in the world. Similar to how when you read in the about the different books and civilizations about mystery schools, and how they're taught in the mystery schools, and then they're supposed to take that information from those schools and then teach it out to the world. So one of the things, if you study all these individuals, study all these civilizations, what you miss is that knowledge of themselves. They had that knowledge of themselves, and they used that knowledge of themselves to solve the problems that they were dealing with at that particular time. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. They weren't trying to do anything miraculous or anything like that. But to us, it seems miraculous because what they were doing, they were using the knowledge of themselves, and then basing that knowledge of themselves to try to solve the problems that we're doing at the time. I think that's missing during this age. We don't deal with trying to take that spiritual energy within ourselves, that understanding of self, to and then use that and put that into solving the problems. So then we have this plethora of ways to solve problems, and ultimately they should be all connected to knowledge of self, who we are as a people, who we are as an individual, and connecting to that origin of existence itself. So one of the first things that we have to do is deal with understanding, how do we find the origin of existence itself. You know, how do we deal with that? What types of sciences that we have to deal with to try to trace back um, the origins of ourselves? And one of the key things that we can use is a science of evolution. I know a lot of people don't want to deal with evolution. They look at evolution as a science that deals with people coming from monkeys, and that's not what evolution is about. Evolution is not about that we came from monkeys, even though we share a common trait. Evolution is not about perfection. A lot of people look at evolution as those things that it's about perfection. But the signs of evolution from the sense of change over time and looking at those things of how we changed over time to try to trace our origins back. And that's important because it gives us an identity past um, everything that we've seen. You know, it kind of eliminates this whole thing about, well, I'm African, well, I'm Moorish, well, I'm this and I'm that. When you start dealing with the origin of self, you start realizing that you're greater than all those things. Those things help, and they help you to identify yourself in the physical realm and the physical existence itself. But we go beyond that. You know, we go beyond time itself, and the only way to figure that out and to understand that and to synthesize that information and use that energy of who we are as a people, we have to look at evolution that that is like a change in time. So it's more about it's change over time and understanding what that change is, and to trace our evolutionary track back to understand who we are as a people. We're more than Africans. We are Africans, but we're more than that. We are Moors. We are more than Moors. We can trace it back further than that. Dealing with nationality. Yes, we are American. You want to claim that, but we are more than that as well too. So we have to be able to trace it beyond that. Before these names were given to these continents and where we were, we have to understand how we evolved before that. You know, how did life on the planet itself evolve because we were there? How did life evolve in the solar system itself, the galaxies, the universe itself? How life evolved from those perspective of atoms and molecules and things like that? We were there. Understanding that power and tapping into that power, tapping into that origins of life, and using that energy to combat the issues that we're dealing with and the problems that we're dealing with. Um, Let me back up. Not even the issues, but the problems that we're dealing with, because that's one of the things that I'll get into in a few minutes. That we've been focusing too much on issues. We focus on the issues of police brutality. We focus on the issue of homelessness. We focus on the issue of poverty. These are all issues, and these are all great issues, and these are all things that have to be combated. But all those issues stem from a problem. We have to get to the root of it. We have to get to the root of what is causing all those things that is happening in the world. And other than just focusing on the issues, let's go to the root. Dealing with the issues of things that were done years ago. We're in a different time. We're in a time of reasoning. We're in a time of scientific literacy. We're in a time of a deeper understanding of those individuals and those things that came before us. We have to start looking at the problem itself and figuring out how we can root that problem out. And once we start looking at the problem that caused all these things that are issues that are important and they have to be taken care of, to deal with the problem, it takes a deeper understanding of self. To deal with the large problem that has caused all these issues that we're seeing, we need to have a deeper understanding of who we are as a people. That's key, and that's my position, and that's where my book that I'm working on is dealing with that as well too. Is because, and that's one of the missing elements that we are dealing with. We're stagnated at this point in time. Is that okay? We've been dealing with this stuff for a long time. You're right. A lot of the elders would say that. A lot of the people that's been in the fight or the struggle, however you want to call it, saying we've been dealing with this since the 80s, since the 70s, since the 60s, and things. You're absolutely right. And the reason why is because we were just combating the issues. Now it's time to shift gears a little bit. We have to and that's about dealing with change in time and how we evolve as a people. We're going to have to evolve and stop dealing with just the issues and focus on the problem. And when we focus on the problem that's causing all these issues, it's 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 going to take a deeper understanding of ourselves in order to use that understanding to solve that problem. So that's about evolution. And as we evolved as we changed over time and things changed from the the, the birth of the universe and life started growing and developing on the planet Earth itself, and then you start getting these continents and civilizations and things like that. We use the knowledge of ourselves, like I said, and spirituality, the connection of who we are, to build these high forms of civilizations. Like Kemet, we built places like Mesopotamia that you find in a lot of books. There's a lot of other civilizations too. We built stuff like that this also was in Babylon and Mesopotamia, present day Iran and Iraq. Places like Kush and Nubia and present day Sudan, Ethiopia, and places like that. We built all these civilizations not based on conspiracy theories. We built them with an understanding of who we are. We built them, and they were great, and they're miraculous to our eyes today because we dealt with scientific literacy and where we understand the world around us at that time. You know, we use science to help us understand the world that we're in to be able to build these civilizations. And that's why they're so great to this day. That's why it's hard and it's difficult for even the technology that's today to try to recreate some of the pyramids that were built in Kush, which are the older pyramids in Sudan, older than the ones in Kemet. So it's using that science, using that information to build those things. And then we build these other civilizations and post classical kingdoms in the north and Central Africa, present day Africa, and things like that. But all these civilizations that we read about, and like I mentioned before, and that you see, they were built not on conspiracy theories. They were built using scientific methods. They were using high forms of mathematics, and physics and things like that. That's how they were built. These civilizations are great today because of that. Can you imagine in like 100 years the things that we would build with conspiracy theories? Probably not much. So again, conspiracy theories are not wrong. It's just that you got to find a way to stop and say, you know what, I need to make these conspiracy theories into something factual. Paranoia is not wrong either. I'm not taking the vaccine because of the paranoia of all this. That's not. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. A little paranoia, matter of fact, kept our people alive this long. But when paranoia gets to the point of it paralyzes you, where you can't, it makes you in a state of fear where you can't really look into things and do certain things, it becomes very dangerous. So it's the same thing with the information that we have among us today. You got to be able to discern the information that we have, research it, and make it factual, and then use that information to build high forms of civilization, like our ancestors did. If not civilizations in a continent, civilizations within your home, how you deal with your mate. All those things stem from being able to recognize who you are as an individual and using that energy within yourself to be able to build high forms of civilization, mentally, physically, and spiritually, not just in the physical sense of these civilizations. And then as things moved forward, as we evolved and through change, and we started building all these civilizations, we started seeing a decrease, if you will, in every civilization. I think it was Dr. Clark who said it, that each civilization goes through its ups and downs, its cycles. We go through our cycles in these high form civilizations, which allowed a lot of individuals to come in and to take advantage during the low tides of our growth and change in time and things like that. So during that time, as we were using scientific literacy and understanding of who we are to build these high forms of civilization, we get this devastating period in our lives where the Atlantic slave trade occurred, where it took a lot of our people from Africa, displaced us in different locations around the world. It eliminated our way of thinking, because in order for you, as Africans were taken out of Africa and brought to the Caribbean and to the Western Hemisphere and to present day England and France and all that type of stuff, in order to make us good workers. I wouldn't say we're a slave, because I never consider ourselves to be slaves. We were enslaved. It's a whole big difference. It's a process that went into place to make us subservient in the way that we were. To take a people that had scientific literacy, that were very mathematical, had the knowledge of themselves, and knew who they were, not just when they came and built that civilization, but before they built that civilization, how they were connected to the universe, We understood that. We understood that our beginnings when the universe came into physical existence. To take a people that had that amount of knowledge and that amount of information, that amount of understanding of the world around them, and to put them in a situation where they become subservient, it took a lot of effort to eliminate that type of thinking. The severing had to occur in order to, you can't control somebody who has knowledge of themselves. It's very difficult. You can't control somebody and make somebody who's to subservient to you who understands all that. It's very difficult to tell somebody you're going to work these long hours without getting paid in the heat and you're going to get abused and all this type of stuff and then take the abuse and enjoy the abuse and all those things if they came from that type of mentality. It's very difficult to do that to somebody. It's hard to do that to somebody today who has a high self-esteem. They may not even have knowledge of self, but they have a high self-esteem of themselves. They think they're the best thing next to sliced bread. It's hard to control that type of individual because their mentality is so strong. So what occurred during the Atlantic slave trade, it was a process that we had to go through, that they put us through to strip us away from that connection of our spirituality, from who we are as a people. Not from a religious standpoint, again, spirituality then with the life force, to break that life force within us down to the point of stripping us away and disconnecting us from our true origin as a people. One of the biggest ways to do it was the slave trade itself. To displace a person from their homeland and their place, that's a shock. That's a shock to the nervous system. Forget about you growing and you telling me different things and trying to psychologically warp. Just move me from one place to another place. Take, for example, today, gentrification. So if you look at gentrification today, I go downtown to DC, things have changed in downtown DC. They don't look the way they used to look. The memories that I've had in places when I was growing up and with my friends and things, it's gone. So I had nothing to connect back to about those memories. So just a building that you grew up and you saw and you did a lot of things in that building. You had a lot of memories in that building. You come back to it years later and it's gone. There's nothing there. There's not even a replica of anything that shows that that building existed. So to move away from that or take somebody away from just the land that they were connected to itself, it's a psychological impact. So to move us and to take us away from Africa, that was key. That was one of the key things to do, to try to start stripping us away from our connection to who we are, because now we had nothing to fall back to. We didn't have a foundation. Those memories that we have built up, they were all gone. We got flung into a different environment, a land we knew nothing about, and we basically had to start from scratch. And it was going back to an instinct type of living where we needed just the basics of life itself, food, clothes, and shelter. So we had to revert back to that type of thinking just to survive, because now we're dealing with the first laws of nature, which is self-preservation. Because once we got ripped from that environment and we moved into and got put in place into a new environment, it's self-preservation. So when you start thinking about self-preservation, you want to preserve your life. And here's this individual, this Caucasian, that's giving you those things that you are equating to life, your food, your clothing, your shelter. You start breaking away from relying on yourself over years. So again, that's why I call it enslavement. It took a process. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. The first couple of Africans that were taken, there was a lot of rebellions. A lot of people rebelled, but you don't ever talk about those rebellions. We never talk about the rebellions on the sea. We never talk about the rebellions that happened in the Caribbean. All those rebellions that happened because people were rebelling against that change. So there was a lot of struggle. So over generations, they broke us down. Over generations, that process had to occur to separate us from the knowledge of who we are. But, however, even though with all of that, the beauty of existence itself, the beauty of evolution and change over time, and how truth works, you can't just destroy it. It can't just be obliterated. It's like if you're dealing with the science of conservation of energy, it can't be destroyed. That's how truth kind of operates. It's always there. So what ends up happening is that individuals that know the information start hiding that information from the individual, so that way they don't see it. They can't get rid of it. It's always there. It takes some types of cataclysm for for someone to reconnect to that information. That information has always been there. The truth has always been there. The connection of who we are has always been there. Outside of Africa now, as we evolve and we change over time, coming from that continent to here, the truth is always there. So that's the beauty of it, and that truth manifested in individuals, like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, into individuals that came on the scene that were able to tap into their spiritual selves, and say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with the status quo, but I'm also going to take this information and be able to share it with other individuals. And I call that time period like the breadcrumbs that were left in time. And that's why it's important to study history. It's important to study this beautiful history. Is so beautiful that there's breadcrumbs that were laid over the years from Mesopotamia, from my ancestors in Kemet, from my ancestors in Kush, left breadcrumbs behind. So that way, years now to the children of those ancestors, they can be able to follow those breadcrumbs out of the forest. Like, when you watch old cartoons or old movies and you go into a dense forest, which we did, we were taken from this great place that we were living in, and we enter this dense forest. You leave breadcrumbs behind, so that way you can find your way outside the forest and be able to see everything outside the forest and see the world for what it is. Our ancestors did that. They left breadcrumbs behind. It's just a matter of finding those breadcrumbs and finding our way back. That's not difficult. We complicate it. We make it more complicated than what it is. The truth is there. It is what it is. It's just that because of our personalities and because we don't want to believe it, we don't want to deal with it. I shouldn't even say believe it. Deal with it. We shun it away. It's not a complex thing. We make it more complicated than what it is. The solution is very simple. It's just overcomplicated because of the situation that we're in. So breadcrumbs were left by certain individuals. They're still dealing with the Atlantic slave trade, this particular slide, and the things that were done, like I was mentioning before, to break us down as individuals, the things that we had to go through to separate us from who we are as a people, and to see ourselves from different conditions. These were all things that we have to study and understand what occurred during that time to break us down. Because again, we had knowledge of ourselves. We used science to understand the world around us, and we built those civilizations based on those things. So those things were taken away, were stripped away from those things. So you had individuals that came on the scene that tapped into that, and tried with the information that they had at the time to try to put information out so that way to tell you that you're more than who you are. It's not that what the society at the time was telling you who you are. And some of them others you don't know, to look them up and things like that. And the last two you may not know. Homework assignment. Everybody can look up Queen Nanny and see who she is. Solitude, the one on the very top, she was a warrior in the French Guadeloupe Revolution from 1772 to 1802. A lot of people don't know about her. Everybody should go do research on Queen Anne, see who she is. There's others. There's a whole bunch of other sisters that came on the scene and did things, and they left information behind and tried to educate people, tell people who they are. They're stronger than who you are, and try to tap into that information so you can start deeper information, not just the information that's just being passed around. So they came on the scene to try to reconnect us and to so we can be able to build those high forms of civilizations, physically, mentally, and spiritually, because then you got to deal with those concepts. Individuals like Marcus Garvey with the Back to Africa movement and the teachings that he was dealing with, Noble Drew Ali and the stuff that he was teaching when he came on the scene, and their wives and the things that they were also teaching and manifesting to try to educate people during the early 1900s about who they are as a people. They're bigger than what society has taught them through the whole breaking down during the Atlantic slave trade, when we were broken down as individuals and made into something else, and who we are. So you had all these individuals who came and dropped these crumbs. So that we were able to tap into that and find those individuals. Bishop Charles, or people know him as forget his Sweet Daddy Grace, who was teaching about the divinity of man, and the connection of man to God. He came on the scene and was talking about those things. Reverend Major Julius, who was on Father Divine, who known as Father Divine, who was also teaching the types of stuff that the divinity within self. Of course, a lot of people know the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who also was teaching certain things about knowledge itself and the importance of knowledge. Breadcrumbs, all individuals who came on the scene to teach about things and information. You had Dr. Clark, Chancellor Williams, Diop, Ivan Van Sertima, Watkins, Madam, all the things, these individuals that came on the scene, Malcolm X, Ida B. Wells, Clarence 13X, that taught about the 5% Nation, Carter G. Woodson, all these individuals that had Martin Luther King, the people that you commonly know, that came on the scene and taught, dropping those types of those breadcrumbs to try to connect you with information, to connect us with information, so we can find ourselves, to connect ourselves back to who we are. The issue with that, or one of the issues with that, is that it was a lot of information that these individuals brought on the scene, a lot of breadcrumbs that came on the scene that that we were trying to tap into, and now we're stuck with all this information, to try to make sense of it. And information is good, but it was something that kept us alive. That's what all the breadcrumbs were. When you just have information, and that's where it is. That's how people will just use information to stay alive, like basic facts, like basic data, to use that knowledge. The circumference of the planet Earth is 24,896 square miles. That's just information. The diameter is 7,920. So that's just information. The weight of the Earth is 66 trillion tons. Just information. Just to find a way to connect, to keep us connected, so that way we can continue to survive, if you will, to try to have a connection with who we were in the past. That's all that was. So information is good. It's just a data, a series of things. It's meant to convey information. It's just bits and facts, and that's what we're dealing with. That's what we've been dealing with for a long time, because we've been disconnected. And when you disconnected as an individual, all you focus on it's like a life preserver. When you jump in the water, you can't swim. Information is thrown in there to give you a way to stay afloat. And that's what we've been dealing with for a long time. We're dealing with information to keep us afloat, and not really getting into the heavy sciences of knowledge and taking that information and say some of this information is wrong, some of this information is correct. Let me dig deeper into this information to gain some knowledge, to gain some understanding on that, and then grow from there. People say the old adage of knowledge is power. Knowledge is a form of power, but understanding is divine. So when you're dealing with knowledge, yeah, you're right. There is some power in there. But when you start taking the information and saying this information is correct, this information, I'm not going to deal with this information. I'm going to research this particular information so I can start gaining knowledge and knowing certain things about this information that's being presented, and then taking you through that whole cognitive process towards understanding. That's when you start getting into a divine way of thinking, if you will, without being, I don't want to be spooky, but a deeper understanding of who you are. So you want to take the information that you have, you want to figure out, okay, this is good information, bad information, figure all that stuff out, gain some knowledge about it, take it through the process of that information or that knowledge that now you're saying that you're going to research it, start applying it so we can gain an understanding. We want to get to understanding. We don't want to stop at knowledge. We don't want to stop at information. We don't want to just have knowledge. We want to gain an understanding. And that's what we want to move towards. And information right now is what we're dealing with, because it's like our life preserver, like I was saying. It's just the means that we have today because of all these breadcrumbs that were left behind, all this data that we have that the ancestors left behind, all these individuals that we just talked about, Marcus Garvey, all these that came on the scene and dropped this information on us. It's our information to keep us afloat, because we're more than what society has been telling us. But now we got to take it deeper than the information. Like, we can't we can't stay there. We can't continue to stay in the third grade. We have to get to the fourth grade. We can't continue to stay in the fourth grade. We have to get into high school. We have to get into college. We have to get into the higher studies and things like that. What we've been dealing with for so long is just the information. It's dealing with, we're in that elementary type of stage, and we have to dig deeper. So that's what information is. That's what we're dealing with today. So a lot of people can come out and recite all these things that I just recited. Recite the weight of the atmosphere, and recite all these things. That's all information, which is great. The distance to the planet Earth, which is great. How much land and how much water, it's all great. That's all information, but you got to be able to research that information and say, this is useless. Why do I need to know this information? I don't need to know this information. It's not going to provide me any life or any way to grow and to get out of this dangerous environment that I'm in. Let me put that information and save distance away. I'll deal with that later. Here's the information that I need in order to survive. Okay, let me dig deeper into this information now. What does it really mean that the weight of the Earth is 6 trillion tons? What is weight? How is the Earth weighted? Why is that so important? What is the weight of a person? Start digging into the sciences of those things to say, okay, I need this information to help me grow and change over time. Because again, you want to continue to evolve. You want to continue to evolve. You want to change. You want to grow over time. So you got to discern that. You have to discern this information that I don't need. Information like, I'll give you a good example. Information like there's aliens out there. That's great. You're right. It's mathematically impossible that there is no life outside of this planet. With the number of even the flat earthers who deal with the flat earth, gotta admit there's other stars out there, that there's other planets out there, there's other solar systems out there, there's other galaxies out there. With the billions of galaxies and the billions of stars and stuff that you even see from your backyard on a nice night, there's a lot of planets out there. It's mathematically impossible that one of those billions of stars, there's no life in it. That's great. That's great information. But who cares? My people are dying. They're in poverty. They're being brutalized by the police. We're dealing with white supremacy in this environment that we're dealing with. We're dealing with all types of situations within the Black community. That information that aliens are out there somewhere is not going to save me. It's not going to do anything for me. It's great information. It's great for me to have. I'll keep it in my mind as a cache when I have a intellectual conversation with somebody. We start dealing with the mathematical formulas of the universe and the measurements of the universe. But knowing that and having that information, so what? That is not going to save someone who's in poverty. It's not going to address the problems that we're dealing with in society, in this particular society, with systemic racism and the other things that we're dealing with. That's great information. So it's not. So we put that to the side. Other information that we come in contact with that talks about our civilizations and who we are as a people. Okay, now we start talking about stuff that maybe I can use this information to better myself, to better my family, to better my community, to ultimately better my nation, the Black nation as a whole. So that's the information that we're talking about that you want to take and start researching. That is the information. That is stuff, I'm not saying throw it away. You can keep that. You can deal with aliens, Area 54, all that stuff. You can keep it. I'm not telling you to get rid of it. That's not my position here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to deal with stuff that is going to save lives because we are in a dangerous situation. We have to understand the dangerous situation we are in as a people. And we have to find ways to collect the information that we need and research that information to take us to the next level and use that information to solve the problem, not the issue. Solving the problem will matriculate and pass down and the issue will be solved. That's how it works. We got to focus on the problem. We got to get back to that root. And again, to get back to that root, we have to deal with an origin of ourselves and connect with that spiritual self, our spiritual self, that life force within us that resides within us, the purpose of why we came into existence, why we are even here as a person. Why are you here as a person? Tap into that life force and use that energy of why you came into physical existence to make the world around you, small world around you, better, and then collectively take it out. So when we're dealing with information, it comes into like bits and pieces, just data. A lot of people have data. It's like Jeopardy. I'll probably be great in Jeopardy because I have a lot of data. It's useless. Some of it is useless, but it's data. But as that data starts just coming together, now it becomes bits of information that we have as a people, and then we got to take that information and we got to start connecting some dots. And that's what knowledge is. Knowledge is taking some of that information that we have and start connecting something. The dots are not going to be connected for you. No one's going to do that for you. Right? And like I said, when I opened up, that's what we're dealing with today. The society that we're dealing with today, we want that microwave information. We want people to take us from the information stage and connect the dots for us. We want to watch a YouTube video and let somebody else tell us how to connect the information without us going out and doing it ourselves and connecting those dots ourselves. Just like when you're growing up, you took money for granted because it wasn't your money. You didn't take that effort to say, excuse me, you took it for granted because it wasn't your money. You didn't take the effort to see how that money was generated, what you can do with that money. And now you start making more sense of what you can do with the money. That's the same thing now. You got to take that information and connect the dots for yourself. You don't want somebody else to do it for you. You want guidance. You want someone to guide you in a way to say, this how, look at it from this perspective, lead you in a certain way to try to connect those dots. But you want to connect the dots yourself so that way you don't take it for granted. And be able to use it in a proper way to make sense of the world around you. And then once you start connecting those dots, and you start making sense of certain things, start getting some insights. Things start popping off. Things that makes sense. I see why now they do that. Now I understand why the federal government does certain things. I understand why this government does that. I don't agree with it. I don't think that it's the best way to do it. But it's insight. It gives you an idea of why things are starting to happen, which is helpful in our abilities to get towards understanding. Because you got to understand why. You got to know why. You don't have to agree with it just yet, but you have to know why it happens. The real reason why is why, not because you made it up, not because you took the information. You say, well, I'm going to take just this information because it speaks to my belief. I'm going to just look at everything and I'm going to connect the dots and I'm going to get some insight to better understand, to better know how the lines connect. I shouldn't say understand because we're going to start getting understanding in a few minutes. That you start connecting those dots, have that insight to figure out, why those things are happening. Again, you don't have to agree with it. You just know why it's happening. Then as you connect more dots and you start getting more insight, that's you applying the information, you start getting wisdom into the things that you're doing. So I like this chart that you see here because it takes you through the whole thinking process of how things are supposed to be. Right now, we're stuck at information. There's a lot of stuff that we have to go through, generally speaking. I know a lot of people don't talk about generalization, but the things that you see in the environment around us, as a people, we're stuck at just information. We just have a lot of information. We don't want to do the work to start connecting the dots. It's only a handful of people that want to connect the dots and really look at the data for what it is, not for what you want it to be. You can't look at it and say, I really wanted to prove my point. I'm going to only go find information to prove my point. No, you have to go do research and look at all sides of the coin. And then from that, start connecting the dots. And all from that, get some insight and seeing what the other half is saying or what this half is saying. Not just go find information just to prove your point. That's elementary. That's like an elementary thinking when you just want to go and so you can sound right, so you can be right, so you can just get information and not want to look at somebody else's books and see and try to connect those dots or any information from somewhere else. All you're doing is getting information, just try to just prove your point because you want to win the argument. We're past that. We're past that stage of trying to better somebody, try to sound better than somebody else, sound profound and trying to sound intellectual. We're at a stage in time where we're in a very dangerous situation and we don't have time for those things. We don't have time for the conspiracy theories and just the conspiracy theories. We don't have time for just opinions. We got to start connecting the dots. We got to get beyond the information. We got to take the life preserver off and learn how to swim. We have to start connecting these dots using the data that's there, take it for what it is, and it is what it is. Why not like it? For years, people took the Tuskegee Experiment and said the federal government was shooting individuals with syphilis. That's not true. I know you want to believe that, but that is not what happened. That is not what's been documented. That is not what the individuals that were there documented that was saying. That was something that was passed down as information so that way you can dig deeper into it. Yes, they allowed black men who did have syphilis to didn't treat it. That definitely did happen. But the story of that itself was misconstrued over years. So again, that's information that we gotta have to find a way to connect the dot. I know some of you also want to believe that. We want to. I mean, and it's because it drives us to want to look at the system from a very, very negative perspective, which is great. We can do that, but we're gonna have to get past that eventually. We're gonna have to dig deeper into the information and understand what really happened um, during that time and how it worked. I know it. Sometimes it's just the ego. You want to hold on to it, but we have to get past that. We have to get into insight and connecting the wisdom and getting to wisdom so we can get towards understanding. So with all that, and it's 8 o'clock, and when I did this presentation, I said this is 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I can jump right into questions. And that's what I want. I want the questions. I want to hear what people have to say and get their comments and address that. And here it is, 8 o'clock, and I'm not even almost. Well, I guess I'm almost done with slides. So now we're finally after all that. What is scientific literacy? Scientific literacy is the ability to understand and apply scientific precepts to everyday life and circumstances. It allows you to make sense of the world around you. You don't have to be a scientist to have scientific literacy, to have an understanding of science, and to use science to make sense of the world around you. That's what scientific literacy is. It's to use that those types of research, the scientific method to understand the what, the when, the where, the why, the how. When you're asking questions, when you're looking at a situation, to be able to go through that process of the scientific method and then use inductive and deductive reasoning, critical thinking measures to come up with a conclusion based on the information that you have around you to 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 see the world for what it is. That's what scientific literacy is. You don't have to have a degree in science. You don't have to be Neil what's the black physicist, Neil Dyson. You don't have to be him. You have to have a degree in electrical engineering to be a scientist, to be a mathematician. It's just thinking from a scientific literate perspective, having an understanding of the scientific method. You can Google it. You can Google the scientific method. That's another homework for today. So you want to look up Queen Anna, then you're going to also look up the scientific method to understand what is the scientific method, and you take that through that process. What is the critical thinking process to analyze the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and how, inductive, deductive reasoning, identify this, identify that. To Google that, Google what that is, and using the scientific method to look at the information that's being presented in Facebook. Look at the information that's being presented in these YouTube documentaries or stories, and taking it through that process to say, is it something that is testable? Can I test this process? Is this really valid? Or is this just information I'm going to have in the back of my head? I'll just use it for Jeopardy whenever I get a chance to get on Jeopardy, and I can use that information then. But taking it through the scientific method through that process, so it helps you to help us to the ability to understand the world around us. So even though if it does sound possible, when somebody says something and that doesn't make sense, take it through the scientific method. Does it go through these processes to make sense? If it doesn't, move on. Go on to the next thing. Somebody's talking about, like I said, we use the example of 5G made the COVID. Take it to the scientific method. That takes time. A lot of people don't want to do that. Again, they don't want to get into that process of taking that time to do those things because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And I use this example when I was doing the science of the weight of the planet Earth. That's how I know it's 6 trillion tons. I use that example. It took me almost a year to be able to figure that out, to get a formula to be able to solve that mathematical it's not a mathematical problem to prove that data of 6 trillion tons. Why is it 6 trillion tons? Why is it a number followed by 21 zeros? It took me almost a year from reading books on physics, on weight, and I was a major in engineering. So I was dealing already with the math. I had differential equations at that time. So I was dealing with the heavy maths and calculus and stuff like that. But it took me a while to find how to prove that number. Is it really real, or is it something I'm just going to throw away because I don't need it anymore? But to be able to prove it, it takes time. To take it through that process takes time. It's very easy to look at Facebook and find somebody post something about something. Oh, that makes sense. I'm gonna use that. Negative. Don't use that. Do not use that. Go and research it. Research. Start googling it. Start doing the basic stuff and seeing, okay, that doesn't even make sense, and just move on to the next thing. That's what we have to get into that stage. It takes work. It's not. I'm not going to then lie to you and say, yeah, you'll figure it out in half a day. Some things will. You probably can figure it out in a day, but other stuff is going to take time. And once you figure it out, we need to speak on only what we know. We can't just sit there and just because again, we're dealing with this time where there's a lot of beliefs out there. There's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. We can't add fuel to the fire. We got to be able to combat that and work against that with knowledge, with information, with not information, with understanding, and taking it from there. So that's what scientific literacy is. And what is knowledge of self? Knowledge of self is a state of having self-awareness of your origin. That's why we started off with a slide of your origin and who we are. Not just Africans, not just Trinidadian, not just European, not just that, but beyond that. Who were you before there was an Africa? Who were you before there was a planet Earth? Who were you before there was a solar system? Who were you? Where were you? Why were you? That's understanding. That's what knowledge of self is, getting into that. It's not just being woke. I hate that term. I'll say it. Somebody else may like it. It's not just being woke, not being aware of what's going on. It's having that understanding of your origin in this world and even beyond that world, but focusing more on who you are in this world. So it's innate potential. I'm not going to read it all. It's knowing the who, the what, the where, the why, the when of your origin, your existence, the current position of your existence, and being able to predict your existence, why you are in the situation. You know who you are. You know why you are the way that you are. Don't play silly. So that's understanding you as an individual and you as self. And then as you grow in understanding, you start recognizing self is not just you. Self is everybody who's black. Black dealing not the color of your skin, black dealing with your level of consciousness, origin. So understanding that's you start growing into that growth. That self is not just you as an individual. It is you, but it's everybody that looks like you on the planet Earth. That's what self is. Knowing the who, the what, the where, the when, the why of self. So starting with self, yes, you first, but then looking at self from a larger perspective. That's knowledge of self. The connection between scientific literacy and knowledge of self is just that. Scientific literacy is the ability to make sense of the world around you. Knowledge of self is the awareness of self as as you interact in the physical and natural world. That's the difference between those two. And I think I might have came, yes, to the end of the slides dealing with scientific literacy and using those things. So in conclusion, and then I'll open it up to questions and questions that you may have, that we have to get to the point where we take the life preserver off or just dealing with information, just dealing with pockets of data. We have to get into the point of reclaiming our history, rebuilding ourselves, gaining the knowledge of ourselves, not just being, but knowing who we are, our origin, not just on the planet, but even beyond that time period. And then using that energy, using that understanding of who we are to embed that into finding solutions to the problem. Using that to try to find a solution. It's not just use anything else, but to use that because that's what we are. That's what it's going to take. It's going to solve the problem. We're going to have to get a deeper understanding of who we are, and take that knowledge of who we are and put that and say, based on who I am, understanding that I've been here from time immemorial, that I've been here since the creation of the universe, having that understanding of who I am from that perspective, tackling the problem from that perspective changes the things that I would do. I would not necessarily go and march to make a change. Why would somebody? I'm not knocking marching. It has its place. So don't say Brother Yahuwah said marching is the worst thing that happened and we need to stop it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you understood who you are, the creator of everything in existence, and you can prove that, and you have a full understanding of that, and then you tackle the problem from that mind state, from that perspective of being the mother and father of all civilization. I'm the father of civilization. Looking at the problem from the father of civilization perspective, I'm not going to march and ask anybody for a damn thing. Going to find a way to build myself up and my community, so we can tackle the problem from a different perspective than just marching. We can use that. I'm not going to just go vote and then wait 4 years and then tackle it from that perspective. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have to continue to do the work every 4 years, every 6 years, every 8 years. It takes a long time. During the civil rights movement, the 60s, that is what we saw. But it took 10 years for like MLK and the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X to build the information that they needed to see the things that we saw in the 60s. It took them years to do that. It just didn't happen overnight. They woke up one night and they start doing these things and making changes during the 60s overnight. It took them a long time to get to that. So it's going to take time for us to rebuild, for us to reclaim, but we can't do it from a perspective of conspiracy theories. We can't do it from a perspective of opinions and just beliefs. We have to focus on the knowledge of ourselves, use scientific literacy, and tackle the problem from that perspective. And that's why it's important. That's another reason the book that I'm writing, the book that I'm working on is geared towards that. It's to get people to understand and to get a guide towards knowledge of self and how to gain knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. It's broken down in that way. So I thank everybody for listening in. I hope not everybody dropped out, because I can't see everybody. Like I said, I usually feed off the crowd and things like that. And I'll open it up to questions now. Turn it back to Sister Ajwa.
All right, thank you, Brother Yahuwah. Actually, more people have joined the presentation than dropped out, so that's a wonderful thing. Thank you all for joining us. And we are going to begin our Q&A portion of the program. So if you have questions, we do ask that you begin typing your questions in the Q&A box. And giving you all a few seconds to do that, just want to shout out the people from who are here with us. Just going to shout out some of your states to show some love. So we have California in the house, Texas, Brooklyn, New York, Chicago. See Fayetteville, North Carolina, special hootie hoo to Fayetteville. Got Baltimore, of course, DC, Atlanta, Georgia. We have Cape Town, South Africa, Orlando, New York City, Pennsylvania, Virginia is in the house. So just want to thank everyone. And it's different cities in California. I know it's multiple people from California, multiple people from Texas. So just want to, shout, everyone out. Thank you all for joining us. We got Washington State in the house. Thank you all. Trinidad and Tobago, Las Vegas, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Yes, thank you all. So as you all, please continue to type your questions in the Q&A box. I will, as I said earlier, filter the questions. So some questions I will combine if they're similar to other questions. The first question, Brother Yahuwah, is coming from Christine, and I'm going to add on to her question, but she starts us off with, can you please comment on using the public library? It is another resource for us to learn and grow. She notes that she went to the library recently and was the only patron there. And on that note, can you also talk about how one can go about doing research. I know oftentimes I hear people say do research or go research it. And perhaps the assumption is people know how to research. Like, and I'm thinking that maybe there are people who may not quite know where to begin with doing research. So even if it were something like the connection between COVID and 5G, but someone says, oh, go research it, where would I begin to research? Are there certain websites that I should look at? How do I break down certain topics to begin researching it? Can you speak a little bit to that in the use of the library?
Very good question. Very good question, Christine. And then what you had on Audrey. So yeah, libraries are starting to become like um, dinosaurs. They're existed, but they. When I was driving through DC the other day, I saw a library. I said, "They still here? The libraries are still here." Um, but yeah, it's and I'm kind of old school. I like to have books in my hand. Probably see the bookshelf back here. There's books all over the house and stuff like that here. So I like to have books that I can actually read and look through, and not just through Kindle. So it's very important to be able to go to the library and to research, to use that resource. It's free. And so if you can't purchase a book and if you don't want to get the book, a lot of that information, all those books that you find are in the libraries. And if they're not in libraries, they can find it for you. Maybe another library has it, and you can request them to get the book for you so you can go pick it up and then sit down and read it. And then from there, it's good. The good thing about being in the library is that once you're reading, starting to read, and you pick up information and you see in the bibliography or in the footnotes or anything like that, since you're already in the library, you can go and continue to find that book that was mentioned inside of that book that you're reading. So it's a great resource to take advantage of it. It gives you the opportunity to get out the world for a second, not get distracted by Facebook, things popping up, Instagram, things that you might find in the web. Because if you start going through the web, it'll take you down a rabbit hole sometimes. The libraries are good where it helps you sit down and actually focus. Getting back to the foundations of doing that type of reading and that research. Research, it's nowadays the way I would answer that question, Ajwa, is that, and I think I spoke to it briefly, is that start off small. You know, the it's not the information that we have around us. It it sounds daunting, but it's really not. It's not that deep. It's just how people try to make it sound so they can sound profound and make it sound that it's deep. But start off small. Go into the computer and start off researching by typing in Google search and just the topic 5G and COVID. You will find a litany of information that comes up on that. Click on the first link. Some stuff is, look at it, so I'm not dealing with that, but start off with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a good start. It's not a scholarly research, but it's a good start. So for all the scholars on the table, don't start killing me now. Yeah, Wikipedia is a good start, and the reason why I say Wikipedia is good because at the bottom, if you look at Wikipedia of like of an article, at the very bottom it tells you the sources. That's what you want to go, and it tells you the primary source and their secondary source. You want to focus on primary source. That's what researching. That's where researching starts. You want the primary source. You don't want to say unless there's no primary source, then you deal with a secondary source. Um, but you want to start there on a topic, go down to read the article and find the information there that they have. Sometimes Wikipedia is not always correct, so don't take it on face value. But go down to the bottom and find the sources that Wikipedia used to come up with that article. That's a very good start. And focus on the primary sources. The more primary sources you have on a topic, the closer you'll get to the answer when you're going through the whole research process. Don't look at it, just tackle it one step at a time. Don't get frustrated. Don't get what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Nervous or scared that it just sounds so profound. No, just take it one step at a time. Google it, look it up on Wikipedia, go down to the primary, find the primary sources, focus on the primary sources, look at that, read the primary sources. The primary source will give you some other primary sources. You want to focus, when you're dealing with research, you want to focus on the primary sources. So that's one of the first step. You want the first count event. You don't want the he said, the she said, and he said that she said information. you want the very first source. And if you can find that very first source on on whatever you're searching, then that's a very good start. And that's where you want to be. And that will start taking you down the right rabbit hole. So if you want to go down that, that's the right way to go. You don't want to deal with a secondary source unless you have no choices. Sometimes no information other than the secondary sources. So when you find if you find the primary sources, that's self-explanatory. When you find the secondary sources, you're going to have to get multiple secondary sources, and that's where it starts to become a little bit complicated when you start doing research. Is that you got to synthesize the information. You have to take the multiple secondary sources that you got and synthesize it, put the information together. This secondary source says that. This secondary source says this, but it says something different. Where do they two align? Okay, then this third secondary source is saying this, but all three of them are saying the same thing. So this is factual. This, okay, maybe not. I'll keep this in the back, but it takes time. Doing research is not doing research on the deeper concepts. It's going to take time. It's not, and I'm being open and frank that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. That I promise you. But it's rewarding because after a month or after a week or after 4 days and you search and you find some information and it connects you to like that's what happened. It's like the best reward that you'll ever have sensation in life. It's euphoric. You know that you made that connection, you read that stuff, and then you start wanting to get into it. It's like a runner's high, you know, when you start dealing with that. So that's where I would start. And another thing, and you can there's if I can find it, there was this good tool, and I used it once to and if I can find it before it is over, it's a link to a process of researching. It takes you through steps of how to research. Go to a university library or university website and look up how to do research papers. The methodology of doing research papers is where you should start. Those are the places where you should go to teach you how to do proper research. If you're looking up stuff, other than what I said. But if I have time, this is a great link that I use that I shared. That shows you, that takes you to a process of to find the primary sources, the secondary sources, and to take that time to do that work. And sometimes you'll run into a wall, and then that's fine. That's all part of the process. You have to work the process, take your time, and get it. But I promise you, once you make the connections, the picture that I had, you start connecting those dots. It's rewarding beyond belief. It's like a runner's high, and you want more. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I'm going to combine two more questions that kind of connect to what you just shared. The first question is from Sean Snell. He asks, as you have said, the body of information that the elders have exposed to us is quite vast, and to just assimilate it is a very considerable endeavor alone. How do we know when to shift to the next level of researching it and connecting dots? If we connect dots too soon, um, are we not risking coming to incomplete or invalid and inaccurate conclusions? And connected to that is a question from an anonymous attendee who asked, how do you know when you dug deep enough to unearth truth?
So that's a very good question, and that ties right into scientific literacy and doing with a scientific method. So when you're doing research, and then I should have mentioned that as well too when about research, you're going to have to use a scientific method. You can Google it. It's not something made up. Everybody uses it and stuff like that. They'll give you the scientific method, and I'll find a link for that, a good one too. But they all the same. But you're going to have to go through that. You're going to have to, just like a scientist, as you're researching information, you're going to have to test the validity of it before you go too far. So you want to start getting involved with groups or individuals to test the information or the stuff that you're picking up. That's all part of the scientific method. So you don't want to go too far, and that's all part of. That's why it takes time. So you want to go as you're researching, as you're getting information, as you're getting books. You want to use the scientific method as your outline. So that's your outline. So you're looking up information and you find a piece of information, then you want to validate that information to say, okay, I've dug too deep, or I'm going down the wrong rabbit hole, using the scientific method on the side as your outline to help you stay on track. that helps you to say, okay, it gives you that tool. It gives you that measure, that ruler to say, I've gone too far for right now. I'm going to just validate this information. I'm going to test this information. It's like a scientist would, to see if it holds water, if it makes sense, if it stands the test going through that process. That's the best way to do it. That's why they connected. Scientific literacy and knowledge of self and research, they all connected. If you use the scientific method and the critical thinking process as your outlines, those are your two outlines. And then you go pick up your books, you pick up your material, and as you're reading the information, you look at your outline and you take that stuff that you're reading through the scientific method, through the critical thinking process or strategies. Use inductive and deductive reasoning to go through that process. So that's the best way to do it. That alone will tell you. That alone will tell you that you've gone too far, or you're going down the wrong rabbit hole, or it's just too much information. And I'll give you another example. And I go back to my engineering days. Is that when we're dealing with, this goes back, I think, to Sean's question, that when we're dealing with, because numbers are infinite. When you start solving a problem in mathematics or in engineering and in science, the numbers are infinite. So what we do as scientists or as engineers and mathematicians, we take that infinite realm of numbers and we limit them. That's what we learn in calculus, because that's just how knowledge is. That's how the information you're gonna come in contact with. All the stuff that you're seeing in front of your face is endless, and it's daunting. You're gonna have to take a portion of it, limited, and study that portion itself, and then make conclusions using inductive and using a critical thinking platform of what the rest of the infinite cycle of numbers represent. And that's what they teach us in mathematics when we're dealing with calculus. We're looking at a series of numbers, but we don't focus on all those numbers. We don't. It's just too much. We use a formula, and the formula that we're using here, the scientific method and the critical thinking strategy, that's your formula to limit or bound your mathematical equation to say, I'm going to deal with only this facet only, and that's all I'm going to deal with. I'm not going to focus on anything else. And then whatever conclusion I come up with based on this calculation that I did using inductive and deductive, that means what I found here is also true here, here, and here. That's thinking like a scientist. That's thinking like a mathematician. And that's what we need to get back to when you think from that perspective. Yes, it's daunting, but we got to be able to bracket it down and to take portions of it and then make connections, synthesize and say, this is true here. So if A plus B is equal to C, that means C and B is equal to A. So that's making that connection. So that's again, using the scientific method and using the critical thinking strategies and the research and going out and finding these primary sources, the information that's out there so the dots can be connected. Those will help you bound the information. So that way, once you have an understanding of that, then you can say, okay, I'm going to deal with the next bracket of information and do the same process again there. Then once you go through that bracket, you understand that limit of what you just bounded and said, then you said, okay, I have an understanding of this portion, and I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to go to the next one. That's what scholarly research is about. And that's why I said it takes time. And that's why, again, once you look at that and you see that that's going to take a lot of time, I don't have time for that. Some people, that's what they say in the Bible, they give up the ghost. They're done with it. They don't want to deal with it no more. They don't want to research anymore. It takes time. And again, and that's fine too. If you don't want to do the research, that's fine. But know your lane. Know that you're not a researcher. Know that you're not somebody who's you want to take the microwave information. You might just be that person, which is just fine. But know your lane is what I say. That know the fact that you don't know all that information. You haven't put it all together, and don't speak it out as though it's the truth, and don't speak it out as though adding fuel to that fire, as I was saying before. Very good question.
Awesome. So next, I'm going to combine a few questions. Henry Ross wants to know, when is your book coming out? And then an anonymous attendee and Justin Kindred, they want to know about any book recommendations specifically on thinking critically and finding knowledge of self. So, when is your book coming out? And any other book recommendations on finding knowledge of self and thinking critically?
I'll answer the last question first. So uh, I'm glad you asked that question, and this is just a selfless plug. So if anybody wants to go to thegodtribe.com, there's a book list in that website. It's one word, thegodtribe.com. And scroll down. There's a book list. There's links to the books. There's information in there that you can find about other books. And when I put that book list in there, those are all fundamental books. Those are all books. I didn't get into like heavy books or anything like that. Those are all, if you take that book list, print it out, and start finding some of the books that intrigue you and learn about, those are all fundamental books. You can't go wrong with that. There's links in there as well too. If you can't find a book, that will take you to a link that you can probably read portions of the book itself too. That's a very good start, because the way like I said, I put the book list together where I looked at it from the perspective when I started off and what I needed to learn and the things that I was reading and connecting with and what helped me to grow and what helped me to change over time, evolve in my thinking and get into deeper wisdom. That's what that book list is. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but if you go to that website and you scroll down, there's a section in there called Knowledge of Self, Resources, or Corner, and in there's a book list, and all those books are good books to get. The other question is about, and then another thing is also that I'll bring it up in a second, is that we have I do this bi-monthly book club where we choose a book and we have a book discussion at the end of the month. The book that we're reading to this month is oh man, I have to go to the next slide. I can't remember it. I'm lost of words. The book that we're reading this month is Bad Arguments. So it's a book actually talking about scientific literacy and dealing with arguments that you hear today, and understanding and looking into those things that are put out on Facebook and figuring out what types of method that someone used to try to trick you into thinking one way when in reality is something else. So that's a good book. That's the book that we have that I'm pushing out to get people to read. And then in August, I'll put a link on the God Tribe page where people can log in, and we have a book discussion on it. And that's we do that every month. So that's also one good book to read that kind of talks about conspiracy theories and how to think critically and stuff like that. That's a good book. But that's also another shameless plug. My book, and I was talking, just joking with the queen the other day. It's like, all this whole COVID thing and all this free time that I have, I'm home. I need to really start focusing more on finishing this book out. So I'm targeting to finishing the book this year and getting it out at the end of this year, beginning of next year. That's what I'm targeting, and I'm putting it out there so I can finish this book. And I've been working on it for a while, and I need to finish it and put it out. Especially with all this time that I've been home because of the COVID situation, just take advantage of this and pull that stuff together and actually get it out. So I'm targeting to have it done this year and getting out by the beginning of next year. So hopefully I get to come back and there'll be a discussion on my book and a book signing type of thing. Just the Audra, that's another plug for next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Michael Evans asks, well, let me just ask in general, can people contact you through the godtribe.com website?
Absolutely. So at the bottom, and we'll get into, I have my email address, you can contact me there, but there's a link in there that once you click on it, you send a message, it actually comes to that same email address. So it comes directly and I address it. Any concerns that you may have. There's certain things that we have to update on that website because we're do a rites of passage program for young Black boys, and I'm going to start incorporating sisters into that rites of passage program, to young sisters too, from the age of 11 to 16 and 12 to 16. So We haven't done that because of COVID, but I need to update the page of when we're going to actually start doing this. There's a lot of stuff on that page. Contacting me, there's resources, there's articles on there that you can come in contact with, and that's how the page is designed to provide information to be as a guide. And even to contact me if you have questions of the things that you're reading. If you need questions that's been asked today, Brother Yahoo, I've been reading this stuff. Am I going down the wrong path? What do you recommend? Hit me up on the God Tribe, and I'll see if I can put you in the right path. Link you up with people. If I know some people in New York, if you're in New York, California, if I know some people that I say, contact this individual. It's a good brother, good sister to probably make sure that you stay on the right direction. I'll help out with that. The mission of the God Tribe page is to assist in that endeavor. Is to assist people who are earnestly learning. They want to learn. They want to get into information and knowledge of self. That's what it's geared towards. You're not going to find books in there or information in there that's not going to guide you in that direction, or information that's going to guide you. Stuff that I've read, stuff that I know that I've been in contact with, that helped me, like I said. So yes, you can contact me through there.
Great. And for everyone, just a reminder, this presentation, all of our Wisdom Wednesdays are recorded and they are uploaded to our IKG Cultural Resource Center page on Facebook. So if you're looking for a replay of tonight's presentation or any previous Wisdom Wednesdays, please go to Facebook to the IKG Cultural Resource page and you will find it there. Also, we place in the chat the web address for Brother Yahuwah's website, thegodtribe.com, and I will place it back in the chat. Our next question from Mrs. Pat Carter: where does mother wit and common sense come in?
That's a very good question. That kind of connects back to that stage that we're dealing with, the information stage. Because remember, we're going through the whole presentation as we lost connection with who we are, the origin of who we are, as we lost that connection, which has always been there. That connection is always there. Just finding ways to tap back into it, to get to the truth and all stuff. Those are all part of the breadcrumbs. Like, and I think I mentioned paranoia. You get that vibe, stay away from somebody, or the common sense type of thing, that thinking of having common sense that the grandparents used to always tell us about. You have some common sense, boy, type of stuff. That's all methods that we innately use to survive. To use the common sense, to use the little basic paranoia to stay away from dangerous situations, so that way we can stay alive. From mother wit, those types of those concepts that our grandparents taught us to try to be sharp and things like that. Those are all things that are forms of information, proverbs, things that traditions that your grandparents might have taught you, rituals that maybe your grandparents might have taught you of how to get dressed, how to shave, those types of things that maybe we, as we were growing up, those are all things that that kind of fall into that realm of information, that we got to find the ways to connect the dots and see where they originated from and how they were used over time to keep us alive as a people, so we won't be completely wiped off the planet Earth. That's where they come from. So that's a very good question.
And along those lines, I'm going to ask a question from AJ Rebels. Dr. Carver, assuming George Washington Carver, Dr. Carver was able to communicate or understand information from plants. I wonder if our ancestors had the ability to communicate with stone. If yes, do you know of a way for us to reconnect and practice connecting with nature, including the planets, oceans, weather, etc.?
So that goes right into the realm of scientific literacy, using scientific method to research. That information has been handed down to us from generation to generation. So the way I would answer that question is that I wasn't around that time, so I don't know if he was able to speak to plants. I'm not saying he did or he did not. I'm not saying that our ancestors spoke to rocks or did not speak to rocks. I'm not going to get into that. The way to answer the question about how we get in tune with nature, the way I do it is I use scientific literacy. I use that concept to make sense of the world around me, to become more acute of why hummingbirds fly the way they do, why, where rain and snow and sleet and all that stuff comes from, to connect me more into the concepts of evaporation and how that works. Because that's the mindset that I'm dealing with. I'm not saying that there's no other way, but the only way I can answer that question from my perspective is that that's how I connect with nature. I connect from nature from understanding the concepts of how water seeks its own level. That's nature, of why it seeks its own level, and the beauty of what water is and how water flows. And when I go to the ocean, and I'm sitting there in that quiet environment where all I hear is the water, what I'm actually hearing, because I'm using my five senses. I'm connecting with nature from that perspective. Um, and that's the extent of what I do. And I do it that way because for me, I need to be rooted into reality. Not saying those other things does not root you into reality. Again, I'm answering the question from my perspective of how individuals can tune into nature, and still being rooted into reality. I hope I answered your question. I'm trying to stay away from metaphysics. I'm trying to stay away from anything else, and to try to just stay focused on it from staying rooted into reality without getting into too many variables.
Okay, thank you for that. Jason Oliver asks, how beneficial is it to gain knowledge of European slash Western cultures and history in order to gain insight on what needs to be learned about our past?
That's that's a good question. I'll answer that question two ways. When I first got into knowledge, started researching and stuff like that, I think it depends on the stage that you're in. It's very important at that stage that when you're coming in to understand European history outside of what we've been taught in school. So that's where it becomes, because it's the way of breaking the misinformation, if you will, of how we've been taught in school about George Washington and all these individuals, and the good things that they did because of all the propaganda. So when you first getting into knowledge, you first start learning information, and that stage in development, and that stage of evolutionary development of changing, yourself changing over time, is beneficial. So you can break that cycle. So you can really understand who Pocahontas was, who Jefferson was, understand that European history and who they were, white supremacy, where it came from, the inferiority complex. All those things are important to understand. But as you grow into your next stage in development, you start realizing that's irrelevant. Knowing them and knowing who they are becomes less irrelevant. What's more relevant is knowing who you are and knowing the things that our ancestors did and the connection that you have to that origin of origins, if you will. And in that process of you focusing more on that, you will also learn about the things that Europeans did, and the connections that they did in the Atlantic slave trade. I think that was your questions and all that stuff. So um, that's that's so it has positions, And I remember when I was the angry black man when I first got into knowledge. Couldn't tell me nothing if it was a Caucasian, I was going to slap him. That's early on. That's like the early stages of development and things like that. And it's needed. I think there's a place for that. But as you grow, you start venturing away from that. Not that's not important. It's just that you focus more on your people. Start focusing more on the history and the knowledge that came out of our people, and the things that they did. And as you start focusing, you start learning about that. You'll also pick up other stuff about European literature and things like that.
Okay. David Moore asks, recently there has been a train of thought that the number of Africans brought to North America via the transatlantic slave trade is very small as compared to the number of indigenous Black people already here in North America. What do you think about this train of thought? So, although this question I know is is related to a specific piece of information, perhaps in your discussion, Yahu, about your thoughts about this train of thought, how might one also go about confirming um, the facts or the details about that particular topic.
It's funny. I was looking to see if Tony was around. The way Tony would answer that question, and I agree with that, is that that's already been proven incorrect. You know, the history that has been researched, and most as far back as Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben and Ivan Van Sertima's books and all that books and Anti-Sheikh Diop, all the books that they wrote that was then with the data that they had then prove that statement to be wrong. And then with new data today and the information that's out there today changes that whole theory that it happened the other way around. That there was Africans here. There was more Africans that were taken out of Africa that went to Latin America and the Caribbean compared to North America. That's you can look at. We've been all over. You know, there's been Africans here on in this continent. There's been Africans in Latin America. There's been Africans in Europe before the Atlantic slave trade. They built there. They developed certain things in Spain and Indonesia and all those places that you can think of that we think is predominantly a European place. Africans were there long before Europeans were even on the scene. So there's evidence of that. There's bones that have been found. There's data that has been found. There's manuscripts of logs that have been found of shipments that were coming into the United. They found old logs of merchant ships and what they were carrying in the belly of those ships. There's books on that in Europe in Britain, where they found that if you open those books up, they show you the manifest of what was in those ships from 1500, what was in the ships back in from 1700s. They can trace all that stuff back from just those books alone, and what was in those ships and how much quantity of property, that's what they called it as, of African people that were in those ships. So all that information is documented. It's very documented to show the numbers of people that African people that were taken from Africa and brought to this hemisphere. And you take that alone and you couple it with the knowledge and the information and the science of their inferiority complex of why they went into Africa in the first place, and they didn't come here to do that. And that whole concept of history, it all connects and it shows and disproves that notion, and it proves back and it connects back to the Atlantic slave trade and how that occurred. I understand why people want to think that way. I understand why it's important to think that way. But again, we can't twist the data. The data is what it is. We got to see the data, what's there, look at it, and then base it on the data that is there. But there's a lot of information. Like I said, read some of the books from Ivan Van Sertima if you have it, Dr. Clark, and then there's relevant more data now. Like I said, they didn't have those books, those manifestos of what was in those cargo books. Those are there now. Some of them are on the internet. You can look them up. There's more information now that proves and shows how the Atlantic slave trade occurred and brought more Africans out of Africa to this hemisphere.
Okay. Spoke about the Tuskegee Experiment, and an anonymous attendee would like to know what is the truth about the Tuskegee Experiment.
Well, so in that story is that there were African men that had syphilis. What the government didn't do, they didn't treat it. They wanted to see what would happen, and that's the negative thing that happened. They knew that what those African men had. They knew what it was. Penicillin was around, but they did not give them penicillin, and they allowed it because they wanted to experiment to see what would be the outcome of syphilis as it grows in the body and things like that. The story has been that they were injected with syphilis. That's not true. What is true is that they did have syphilis by all types of means of how you contract syphilis. And when the government went down there and they knew about it, they did not treat it. They gave them other stuff. They gave them vitamins. They gave them other things, placebos, anything else to tell them they were being treated, but they weren't being treated. They allowed it to happen so they could study it. And they did it to African men, and that's what the devastating thing is, and that's the truth of it, and that's devastating on its own. And we don't need to add to it. We don't have to add to that story. The story, the, what really happened itself, and in truth, is it was devastating to allow that to happen, to allow those men to die when you could have gave them penicillin and let them live, all because of your ego to want to do a study without letting them know. That was deceitful. That was undestructive. That allowed those men that have families, they died for no, they could have lived. So all the truth and all that, that's a devastating thing, and that's something we should focus on, and not the other pieces of it that has been handed down over time that's not accurate. And that you can easily, there's some people that have been interviewed over um, that they interviewed them, and they told the same exact story that I just told. That's what happened to them. But now people want to use the Tuskegee experiment to the whole vaccination of COVID, and they want to tie it to that. And I think there was an article in the Washington Post where one of the wives was combating that. She was saying, don't use that as your excuse not to get the COVID virus, because that's not what happened. They just didn't treat it with that time period. And is the government questionable? Yes. Should we believe everything the government puts out? No. You gotta research that. They could do certain things that are harmful, but there's no need to add misinformation to the whole story. The truth is the truth, and take it for what it is. And it's sometimes it's devastating on its own without having to add more information to it to make it more devastating.
Okay, thank you. And our final question for the evening um, is asking, how would you define our problem? Like you were mentioning, there's a lot of issues within the Black community, but how would you define our problem as you see it? And then I would add on to that question, what are a few solutions that you could offer us as it relates to the problem that we have as you see it?
So the problem, as I see it, is white supremacy. That's a problem. It all trickles down from that. Their concept, their inferiority complex is causing the police brutality of how they treat African people in the streets. Their inferiority complex of 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 who they view themselves and how they develop white supremacy within the judicial system, within the health system, within within the educational system. All those things are what is causing the issues that we see in the world today. They view us a certain way, so they increase our police brutality. The health issues within the community are caused because is within the health system and how it's embedded in the health system. The concept of white supremacy is held in the white in the health system. It makes us seem as though we're not worthy enough for healthier foods. The judicial system, there's been a lot of people now that's been taken out of prison because DNA have proved to show that they weren't guilty. But the way the judicial system was set up, it imprisoned a lot of our brothers in prison when they weren't even guilty. But because of the inferiority complex, we were seen as being guilty. So now we get in prison. So the judicial system is causing the high rate of men being incarcerated for crimes that maybe they did not commit. Um, the poverty, the way the poverty issue itself, it all stems from white supremacy that no, you're a black person, I'm more superior than you are, and you're an inferior person. You should not make more money than me, and I'm going to keep you in that state because that you staying in that state buttresses capitalism and allows me to make more money. So that's the problem is dealing with um, white supremacy, the systemic racism that is flowing through all these other systems, and how those are used. Um, Real estate, all that stuff. You can't live in a certain area. And that's all embedded within the laws and regulations and codes and things like that, cul-de-sacs, and where you can live as a black person and stuff like that. That all regulates people, and it develops those issues that we're combating. And they are all legitimate issues. They're all issues that need to be solved, but they all stem from that. And one of the key things that I've been working on in my position is what this whole topic was about, was to focus more on the knowledge of who we are and combating that problem of white supremacy from knowing who we are, understanding that that's where it's stemming from. That's what's causing all these issues. That's what's causing all these things, and trying to find a way to deal with that disease. That's what white supremacy is. And African people that have been subjugated and by this system have also have that disease within them. So it's not just regulated um, to Europeans, but because we've been living in this environment, because we've been dealing with the systems that have been created out of that inferiority complex, we carry that disease too. So the ways to combat that, to get rid of that, is to deal with the knowledge of yourself, find your origin, get rid of that disease, just like you can get rid of any cold or anything within your body. You got to take the right medicine to get it out of your body. And knowing who you are, knowing your origin in life, in physical existence, physically, mentally, and spiritually, is that medicine that helps to eradicate that stuff out of your system. And it also helps to eradicate um, that whole concept, because it doesn't give them an avenue out. It doesn't give the concepts of that system that I just portrayed, it doesn't give them an avenue out. It blocks it. It stops it cold turkey, and it makes the system realize that it can't go in this direction anymore, because now you're dealing with somebody who has knowledge of themselves. You're not dealing with an enslaved African. You're not dealing with somebody who does not know who they are. You're dealing with somebody who understands intimately who they are. And it's hard for me to deal with that person in that way and make them deal with the system in that way, because they know who they are. That's my position, and that's what I gear everything towards, to try to educate, not try, but attempt to educate people into dealing with the knowledge of themselves and use that to better themselves and their family. A very good question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's presentation. That concludes our Q&A portion of the evening, and we're going to now go formally into our closing. So I would first like to invite everyone out to our next Wisdom Wednesday, which will take place on Wednesday, August 18th, featuring Brother Mbwebe Ishangi speaking on intergenerational wealth planning.
Mm.
Sorry, I was muted. Um, you can find this presentation as well as other Wisdom Wednesday presentations on our Facebook page, IKG Cultural Resource Center. Again, our next Wisdom Wednesday is August 18th, featuring Brother Mbwebe Ishangi speaking on intergenerational wealth planning. And now I want to close it, bring it back to Brother Yahuwah, if you have any closing remarks.
No, I thank everybody. It's the first time for me to do a presentation like this. Like I said, I like to feed off the energy and get how everybody's taking it and things like that. But I appreciate everybody's time. I know you could be anywhere, but you chose to be here, so you took the very first steps of gaining knowledge and going towards that direction to connect the dots. And I think that's an applause to you for being present. And check us out. Check us out at thegodtribe.com. Get the book, Bad Argument. Join us for the next book discussion in August 1st. And on that page, find ways to link with us. Link with me at Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, so I appreciate everybody's time, definitely, and I'm glad you guys were able to make it. And I hope you got something out of this information. Again, this is information. You got to go research it. I'm taking this stuff on face value, and it's not meant to combat, the conspiracy theories that you want to have. That's fine. You can have them. Keep them a safe distance when you start dealing with the environment that we're dealing with, because we're in a dangerous environment, and we got to find solutions to the problem, and not focus on everything else. Deal with the facts. Deal with the data. Don't don't try to twist the data or any way like that. Take it for what it is, and let's just move on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone again for joining us. And we are finished. So hope to see you all next month. Thank you.